Today I'm going to be speaking about something which, to be honest, I pondered about it and I was like, should I talk about this or not? Because I don't really want to get involved in the drama that's gone alongside this situation. That being said, I was like, oh, this is a very, very interesting kind of discussion that's arisen surrounding this whole topic in general. You know, if you're not really up to date with all that kind of drama side of things, recently there's been a lot of talk about like secret marriages and like marriage in general in Islam and like, you know, what's permissible, what's not, that kind of thing. And I wanted to talk about it today because I was like, I've been thinking a lot. And this whole situation has left me with more questions than answers. And no, I'm not going to delve into the personal behavior of people because let's be honest, at the end of the day, humans are humans. And from the beginning of time, you know, people have made certain choices, people have done things. But I am going to talk about the kind of the interesting institution of marriage within Islam. And I just want to give my thoughts because it's actually really interesting. And as I said, all this talk recently about marriage and secret marriages and co-wives and all this stuff has kind of, just got me thinking. So yeah, I'm just going to dive right into it. So yeah, let's get going. So the first thing to kind of distinguish here is in Islam, marriage is different because number one, you're allowed to have 4 wives. So from the get-go, polygamy is permitted. There is also in the Quran and the Sunnah, there is a big emphasis on marriage because it's said to complete half your deen. So deen is like your faith, your belief. So, or half your religion, your way of life. So getting married is important because obviously getting married is the basis of starting a family. You can take 4 wives as long as you take care of them equally. Basically, whatever you give to one, you need to give to the other. And that's everything. That's time, that's money. But obviously, as you can imagine, that's really hard to do, if not near impossible, because, you know, humans are not robots. We are fallible. So it's in today's world, you'll hear most scholars say, you know, even though you can take 4 wives, it's better if you kind of just stick to one because that's fairer on everyone. And leading to my next point, not only are you allowed to get married, you are allowed to have a sex slave, have a woman, your slave, and you are allowed to force yourself onto her without her consent, which is absolutely horrific. And many people in the time of the Prophet and the Prophet himself had slaves, and I don't even want to think how that played out. It's completely horrific, but as I said, it's there in the hadith and it's there in the Quran. God in the Quran actually does say whatever your right hand possesses, you can basically do whatever you want with them. As I said, completely horrific stuff. But in today's world, obviously most countries where Muslims live, slavery is no longer permissible. And so to have a sex slave is like basically illegal in pretty much all Muslim countries now. And obviously if they're living in the West, then that's an absolute no-no, not going to happen legally because you can't. Like, we don't have slaves anymore, thank God. Thankfully that practice is gone. And I know it does happen in parts of the world, but legally, at least, it is not sanctioned anymore by law. And so that's the horrific aspect of it all. But as I said, legally, that practice it can't really take place anymore in most parts of the developed world. So so that's kind of the outline. When I became Muslim and stuff, I did know about the 4 wives thing, but I was always told that no, this is just what, you know, people do very rarely. It's not common. And to be fair, back then it wasn't. I mean, the whole manosphere thing hadn't really kicked off. The red pill movement hadn't really kicked off online. It wasn't really as widely known. So these kind of things about like men being promiscuous and ladies having hypergamy, as I said before in one of my other videos, I feel like sometimes what we're seeing is actually a merger of like 2 different cultures or 2 different thoughts coming together. And the reason I say that is because these days it is quite common that you will now hear the Dawa people saying, oh no, it's fine, men are more promiscuous than women anyway. Women are attracted to men who are successful, so of course a woman wouldn't mind sharing a really successful, let's just say a billionaire. And obviously Islam has always permitted that, so Islam got it right from the get-go. They understood women's nature, they understood man's nature. And as I said, that's something that's more spoken about now, but I hear it a lot now more in the Dawa community, whereas when I first became a Muslim it wasn't that widely spoken about. But that's clearly a link between the emergence of the red pill community, of the manosphere, and the Dawa team adapting their message to agree or to reflect how Islam is always right. And that's why now I see a lot more people promoting polygamy in line with that. Whereas before it wasn't that common to hear it because, like I said, society wasn't really at that point yet. Which leads me to my next point. Yeah, so what I've really been thinking about is, if you can have a secret wife, like if you can lie to your wife in Islam, and that's okay, as we're hearing quite a lot, we've been hearing quite a lot this past week, it's permissible to lie to your wife. It's permissible to have a secret wife. But what message does that send to women? What message does that send to men? Now, I'm sure that a lot of Muslims are finding this out for the first time also, because I don't think this was common knowledge. This situation has kind of brought this to light. I can already predict what the kind of scholars would say in terms of this, is that I bet you they don't promote the practice which I'm referring to, known as misyar, which is secret marriages, and the kind of deception which comes along with not telling your previous wife about it, and kind of almost using marriage as a way to bait women in to a situation which, let's be honest, they probably think it's going to lead to more, but you are allowed to just drop them because they agreed to it at the end of the day. How is this fair at all to women? Like, how would a Muslim woman rationalize that in her mind, that this is actually permissible? I don't see any situation where a secret marriage would benefit a woman unless she was extremely promiscuous. And that in itself, you could call that hypersexuality, which in itself is usually an indication of some kind of psychological issue. I'm sorry, I just have to say it. Hypersexuality or impulsive sexual behavior is some kind of form of self-destructive behavior. It can be. Look, I know there's going to be women out there. There are women out there who, let's just be honest, who are like that and they enjoy it. And I'm not referring to them. I'm just talking about your average woman. I really, really don't think that this kind of situation would appeal to them. I can only see this really appealing to a man who wants to get laid, let's be honest, and who's going to tell a woman that, yeah, this is a marriage, and then just drop her. I just don't see any benefit in this, apart from, as I said, a man who wants to get laid. And surprise, surprise, you don't have to tell your wife. And why do you think that is? Because she's going to give you hell. She's going to give you hell to the point where you would probably just feel like it's not worth the headache. But if you can do it behind her back, that removes that emotional kind of pressure that you're going to have. Because if you had to tell her this, then of course she's going to resist to it. So of course, if he goes to his previous wife or wives and says, look, I want to, get laid this weekend and I'm going to have to marry her. And if she gets, well, of course the wife is going to say no. Hence the reason why it's allowed to not tell her. And I always say it, I'm only talking about it from the perspective of, this is God who gave this the green light, God. So I'm not talking about the humans involved. I'm talking about the so-called God who actually allowed this situation, who actually paved the way for people to be involved in this kind of thing. Yeah, so here we are with this God who's meant to be, the leader of the universe, and he knows everything. And he didn't stop to think, oh, if this guy secretly goes with this girl and she has some kind of STD, some kind of disease, And that guy gets it because, they don't have to strap up. The guy doesn't have to strap up and wear protection. There's no mandate on that. He does that, and then he goes back to his wife, and he hasn't told her what he's been getting up to. That puts his wife at risk because she doesn't know that now she might need to go to a clinic and get checked out. Surely God would have preempted that. God, who invented STDs because he made everything, why didn't he put anything in place for the women to protect their health? Because some STDs can remove your fertility. Some are really, really bad, especially if you don't have access to medication that can alter your life forever. So yeah, it's left me with questions like that. And look, I guess maybe the scholars would say like that's why it's discouraged to do this practice. And I really think they do. So I've seen videos where they have said this is discouraged. This is a kind of an outlier. This is an outlier in Islamic behavior. This isn't something that was ever encouraged. But the problem I see with like this in the Sharia, as always, if God gave it the green light, then it's okay. Then you can't argue against it. It's really not in this whole situation is really not in favor of the women. It's opened my eyes to a whole new thing that I didn't even know about before. Like I never considered this because I knew about secret marriages kind of like, I mean, I always knew it from the perspective of like you can take a co-wife. I always say it's not really about the humans, it's about this helps me to see how the Muslim God is not true, because this is contradictory to his quality of being merciful, the most merciful, which he calls himself. He says he's the most merciful. Is this merciful behavior towards women? Is this merciful, allowing them to be used in such a way, allowing them to be taken advantage of in such a way? I'll let you be the judge because we all know what the answer is. Yeah, so one of his names in Arabic is the All-Knowing. Now, this is also contradictory to being the All-Knowing God, because did he not have knowledge of the potential health implications of having a secret marriage, of what that can do to a woman who has no idea, the original wife who has no idea what's going on? She didn't ask for that. And her husband could do this, come home and give her something which she literally had no say in. That to me contradicts God's nature of being the all-merciful and the all-knowing, because it's like he's letting people walk into a situation which is bad for their health. To me, it's the equivalent. I mean, but like it's the equivalent of telling people that it's okay to eat junk food. Like junk food is good for you. It's something along those lines. It's like making an error or allowing humans to walk into a situation which is risky. As I said, the woman at the end of this, the original wife, has no say in that situation. This is something I've actually found out more about now that I'm a non-Muslim, but like this is what I mean. This is exactly the situation so many of us find ourselves in, is where you come into Islam or you're born a Muslim and you are taught that it's so wonderful, it's perfect, and something like this pops up and it forces you, if you're, have the cognitive ability, but it brings questions up. And you either go down two paths. You're going to do cognitive dissonance, or you're going to just cover your ears and say, nope, I'm not listening to that. Islam is perfect. I am not challenging my worldview. Or for those people whose minds are open, they're going to go, oh my gosh, like really? This is allowed? This contradicts everything I've been taught about healthy relationships, about safety, about risky behavior, and here my God has sanctioned this. I'm interested to see what the learned scholars have to say about this now that this situation has got so much publicity and attention, and many people are asking questions now, and I'd assume many Muslims have questions. As I said, what it comes down to is it is still permissible. So if somebody does it, you can't tell them that they're wrong. And that's where the problem lies. The problem lies in the theology behind it. Even for me, this is a learning curve. I didn't really know the ins and outs, the kind of rulings on this, or the hadith that have reported this happening, or like all of these kind of things. So I'm actually learning along the way also. Yeah, what message does this send to Muslim women? And I just wanted to share my thoughts on how it could potentially make them feel. Although, as I said, I think depending on the relationship you have with Islam, depending on your interpretation, this might not even bother you at all, because you're like, look, I don't subscribe to this kind of Islam anyway. My Islam is a personal relationship between me and God. I'm spiritual, or I just enjoy the kind of family life I have with Islam, and I trust my partner, I trust my husband. So it might not, some people might not pay much mind to it. But I'd imagine for those who have a different interpretation of Islam, this would also leave them with maybe feeling a bit uneasy, or maybe not. But when I heard this, I did think, you know, my female brain kind of was like, oh, this is a very tricky situation. This is very interesting from my female perspective. Yeah, and it just left me with more questions, really. Yeah, and it definitely has opened a can of worms. But anyway, guys, that was just my 2 cents on the situation. Thank you so much for watching, if you watch, and yeah, I'll see everyone again soon.